During the Battle of Sekigahara against Ii Naomasa and his army, Shimazu Toyohisa manages to mortally injure Naomasa, but is critically wounded in the process. Naomasa's army is forced to retreat due to Toyohisa's perseverance and resilience. As he walks from the battlefield wounded and bleeding, Toyohisa finds himself transported to a corridor of doors, where a bespectacled man at a desk waits for him. As he is about to attack the bespectacled man, Toyohisa is sucked into one of the doors and dropped into a field, unconscious. Two elven children, speaking in a strange language, find Toyohisa and decide bring him to a castle ruins, the hideout for two other drifters. Toyohisa's wounds are stitched up, and after waking up from a dream, he meets Oda Nobunaga, a daimyo who was killed 18 years prior to Toyohisa's involvement in the Battle of Sekigahara, and Nasu Sukataka Yoichi, an effeminate archer who died almost 4 centuries ago. The trio discuss how they met the same bespectacled man who brought them to the unknown world. Outside of their hideout, a female spy monitors the drifters and is contacted by a man via a magical crystal ball to check on her status. The man in white decides to meet the drifters and mobilize their men, known as the Octobrist Organization, to prepare for the upcoming war with the Ends, an opposing force advocating for the destruction of the world. In a desert wasteland, Hannibal and Scipio Africanus are in the middle of a heated argument while a member from the Octobrist Organization, Ham, observes them from afar. Ham is ordered by the man in white, Abe no Seimei, to bring the drifters to him in preparations for the war against the Ends. Meanwhile, the elven village located near Toyohisa's group of drifters is attacked and set on fire by soldiers from the Orte Empire for associating with the drifters. Alerted by smell of battle, Toyohisa heads to the village to rescue the elves to repay his debt to the young elves, Marcia and Mark, for helping him earlier. Joined by Nobunaga and Yoichi, they easily defeat the elves' human oppressors. Enraged by the carnage and cruelty inflicted upon the elves by the Empire's soldiers, Toyohisa brutally beats Aram, the commander knight charged with massacring the elves, with the sheath of his sword before convincing the elves to kill Aram themselves. In the corridor of doors, the bespectacled man, Murasaki, is visited by his nemesis, Ii, who mocks his efforts to send drifters to the unknown world to combat her Ends, who have begun invading the southern regions of the world. In the kingdom of Carnides, Seimei and Ham try to convince the commanders of the defensive troops to let Scipio and Hannibal take charge of their army. However, the leaders refuse to give the two drifters command over their troops, seeing them as nothing more than useless old men. Unable to reason with the Carnides soldiers, Seimei decides to withdraw the Octobrists and the drifters from the country as the Ends and their army, consisting of dragons, goblins, and other non-human races, begin their attack. The leader of the Ends, the Black King, sends Hijikata Toshizo, Jeanne d'Arc, and Anastasia Nikolaevna Romanova into the battlefield, and questions Minamoto no Yoshisune if his allegiance is with the drifters or the Ends. Yoshisune vaguely states he will go the side that interests him the most. World War II fighter pilot Naoshi Kano descends into the world via a corridor inside his aircraft. Though bewildered by the circumstances, Naoshi engages the Black King's dragons, thus indicating himself as a drifter. With the aid of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Seimei, Ham, Scipio, and Hannibal escape from Carnides to join up with Toyohisa's group. The Black King orders the Ends to find the drifters and kill them. Meanwhile, the female spy monitoring Toyohisa's group is discovered by him and his companions. The spy, Olminu, informs the drifters that they have been brought to the New World to fight against the Ends, though the trio quickly reject the idea, much to her shock. Olminu explains to Toyohisa, Nobunaga, and Yoichi that their purpose as drifters is to save the world from being annihilated by the Ends. To accomplish this, she informs them that the Octobrists are tasked with gathering the drifters together and appealing to the kings and feudal lords of the various states and countries to give command over their armies to the drifters. However, Nobunaga is skeptical that the lords would allow outsiders to take charge of their armies. Instead, he proposes that the drifters, led by Toyohisa, take over the Orte Empire, much to Olminu's initial horror. Meanwhile, following his success at Carnides, the Black King tends to his wounded troops and orders Grigori Rasputin to spread the news of Carnides' defeat to recruit more soldiers in their army. Back in the elven village, Toyohisa's group offer to assist the elves with their fight against Orte to reclaim their state, though Toyohisa and Nobunaga fight over the leadership arrangements. Shara, the eldest son of the murdered village's chief, interrupts them and pleads for their help. Toyohisa agrees to take the role of the commander, and begins to set a trap for the Orte punitive forces set to arrive in 3 days. On the third day, a force of 200 Orte troops march into the village, only to find it uninhabited. Encamped in the trees outside of the village, the drifters and elves prepare to strike the Orte soldiers at nightfall. Prior to the ambush planned by the drifters, Nobunaga uses corpses and various human wastes to create a saltpeter pit after Toyohisa buries the heads of the deceased as a sign of respect. Meanwhile, Yoichi begins to train the elves in archery, and is surprised to learn that they have an innate aptitude for it. As night sinks in, the Orte troops notice that the village's water well was dumped with excrement. At nightfall, Toyohisa and the elves launch their attack on the Orte soldiers as Nobunaga forms an enclosure to trap the Orte troops and continuously bombards them with waste-laden arrows. Toyohisa beheads the commander of the troops, prompting the remaining soldiers to flee. In the forest, Yoichi kills the fleeing soldiers, who fall victim to excrement-infested traps. After their successful battle, Toyohisa urges the elves to rescue the female elves. Disguised as Orte troops, the drifters and elves make their way to the local magistrate's fort and locate the women. Much to his horror and disgust, Toyohisa discovers that the women have been used as sex slaves by the Orte soldiers and vows to slaughter them all in retribution. After successfully taking over the fortress, Nobunaga rummages through the magistrate's office for vital documents. At his inquiry, Olminu reveals to Nobunaga that the founder of the Orte Empire was Adolf Hitler, who committed suicide shortly after establishing the country 50 years ago. Receiving word that Toyohisa plans to execute the Orte soldiers for raping the female elves, Nobunaga stops him and gives the execution order himself. Toyohisa punches Nobunaga for his interference, and the two reach an agreement to let Toyohisa do whatever he feels is right in the future. The drifters return the women back to their respective villages with a proclamation, which contains information about the heavy losses Orte is suffering from waging wars with numerous states. As a result, elven villages across the land begin to revolt and join the drifters. In Orte's capital city, the city's council discusses the losing wars in neighboring states, particularly their war against the merchant guild of Gyubinin. Count Saint-Germain, a powerful nobleman and former ally to Hitler, realizes Orte's impending downfall and chooses to seek an alliance with the drifters. At nightfall, Jeanne d'Arc, Gilles de Rais, and several soldiers of the Black King's army approach the drifters' hideout. Jeanne d'Arc, Gilles de Rais, and a cavalry of the Black King's army attack the drifters' camp. After evacuating the elven women and children, Toyohisa confronts Jean, who he mistakes for a man, while Yoichi faces off against Giles. In the forest, Nobunaga and the elves take care of the cavalry. With Olminu's assistance, Toyohisa is able to defeat Jean, but refuses to kill her when he realizes that she is a woman. Meanwhile, Yoichi struggles in his battle against Giles due to the latter's inhuman strength and durability. Before Yoichi is nearly killed, Butch and the Sundance Kid arrive at the scene, using their Gatling gun to destroy Giles's body and save Yoichi. Giles barely survives the brutal onslaught, much to the drifters' shock. Seeing Jean being rescued by the Dragon Riders in the Black King's army, Giles dies with a smile, and promises to wait for Jean to join him in the afterlife as he disintegrates into salt. After reuniting with Olminu, Seimei introduces himself to the drifters as the leader of the Octoberist organization. In a secluded area, Yoichi reflects on his battle with Gilles de Rais when he is approached by Yoshisune, who mocks his former subordinate for following Bushido despite committing dishonorable acts during the Genpei War while under his command. A distressed Yoichi tells Yoshisune he will never take orders from him again, but Yoshisune merely laughs at him before he departs. Meanwhile, Seimei tells Nobunaga he was brought to the New World to help combat the Ends. Toyohisa returns and informs the group that he knocked Jean unconscious in a nearby well. Seimei reprimands Toyohisa for allowing Jean to escape due to her gender, but Toyohisa is determined to uphold his principles and not become Murasaki's pawn. The next day, Scipio, who was separated from Seimei's group during the ride to rendezvous with Toyohisa's group, encounters Naoshi, who has been appointed the Sky God to a tribe of anthropomorphic dogs. Back at the Drifters' camp, Butch and Sundance Kid explain the mechanics behind their firearms to Nobunaga, who becomes ecstatic at the notion of producing more modern firearms. Nobunaga reveals to a concerned Seimei that he wished to create a multiracial federation with Toyohisa as their leader. At nightfall, Toyohisa leads his group to free the dwarves from Orte while Seimei, Butch, and Sundance Kid leave to search for Scipio and continue their investigation on the Ends. While Count Saint-Germain and his aides journey to the Elven village to meet with the Drifters, Toyohisa's group attacks the Orte Empire's largest armory in Godolka to save the dwarves. Utilizing the gunpowder that Nobunaga has concocted with the elves' assistance, Toyohisa leads the charge against the troops stationed there. However, they are unable to enter the walled town after the Orte soldiers closed the entrance gate. Hannibal gives Nobunaga the idea to use Yoichi's arrows and Olminu's stone wall spells to cast a staircase alongside the gate, enabling Toyohisa's group to invade the town and free the dwarves. Since the dwarves have been suffering from starvation during their captivity, Toyohisa orders meals to be prepared for them instead of taking down the castle defenders. Toyohisa negotiates with the remaining Orte troops to surrender peacefully and allows them to escape, though he slays the commander. When Yoichi prepares to pursue the fleeing troops, a habit he developed when serving Yoshitsune in the past, Toyohisa stops him and tells him that he does not have to follow dishonorable orders anymore since this is their war, much to Yoichi's delight. Meanwhile, a member of the Octoberist organization and his partner, Doug, spy on the Ends at Carneades. They are horrified to learn that the Black King taught primitive agriculture to the monsters that will someday replace the humans once the Ends have eliminated mankind. The Black King attempts to recruit one of the 6 great dragons, the Bronze Dragon, into joining his army, but is met with contempt and refusal by the latter for subjugating his dragon brethren as pets in his army. Using his ability to replicate the cells of any life form, the Black King tortures the Bronze Dragon by causing his body to suffer from cancerous growth to gain his compliance. Afterwards, Rasputin presents the completion of a simple alphabet and a syncretic religion for the demihumans to learn to help establish a unified, multiracial community, as per the Black King's wishes. Meanwhile, Jean awakens from her coma after her fight with Toyohisa and is informed by Anastasia that Gilles de Rais is dead. An enraged Jean vows to avenge her fallen comrade by killing Toyohisa, to which Anastasia scolds her for her recklessness before promising to let her do as she pleases when the time comes. In Godolka, Nobunaga requests that the dwarves begin forging muskets for their army to use in future battles. The next day, Count Saint-Germain and his companions arrive in Godolka to meet with the Drifters, sending his aides to test Toyohisa to see if they are worthy to form an alliance with. Saint-Germain reveals to Olminu that he is a drifter, and that he wants to sell the Orte Empire to the Drifters before Orte is destroyed by other warring countries. In order to accomplish this, Saint-Germain recommends that the Drifters plan a coup d'état to seize Orte as their territory. While Saint-Germain's aides sneak the Drifters and their army into the Orte Empire's capital city, Saint-Germain holds an emergency council meeting with the lords charged with overseeing Orte and informs them that he is selling the country to the Drifters. His attempt to coerce the noblemen to surrender peacefully, however, is disrupted by Rasputin, who possesses 2 of the nobles to reveal that the Black King is also planning to seize the Orte Empire for his campaign. After being humiliated by Toyohisa and Nobunaga, Rasputin retreats, and the Black King sends Hijikata and his troops to combat the Drifters in the capital, shifting their focus from seizing Orte to destroying it to prevent the Drifters from obtaining it. To assist with the ensuing battle, Saint-Germain gives his personal army, the Sacred Band of Thebes, over to Nobunaga to act as the army's gunner squad while Toyohisa and Yoichi lead the dwarves and elves, respectively, into the fray. After the Drifters successfully take out the End's vanguard, an angered Hijikata heads onto the battlefield. As the Drifters and their army decimate the End's troops, Hijikata gives orders for his soldiers to break into smaller units and disperse into the streets, setting the city ablaze while heading to Orte's capital buildings. Hijikata and Toyohisa meet in the street and engage one another in a deadly duel, with Hijikata using the ghostly images of dead Shinsengumi to attack Toyohisa. Meanwhile, Nobunaga and Hannibal decide that instead of chasing the En's troops, they will trap their enemies in the capital buildings when they arrive and kill them with Yoichi's squad and Olminu's reluctant assistance. With their army destroyed, the Black King orders Hijikata to withdraw from his fight against Toyohisa, who is left badly injured. Back in Carneades, Rasputin apologizes to the Black King for their failure for seizing Orte, though the Black King is pleased that they were able to cripple the capital city and gauge the drifters' strength. Akechi Mitsuhide thinks back to hearing Nobunaga's voice during his encounter with Rasputin and decides to join the Ens in the hope of killing Nobunaga in the next battle. What are your thoughts on the list? Is there anything you disagree with, or did I leave off certain foods that should have been on the list? During the Battle of Sekigahara against Ii Naomasa and his army, Shimazu Toyohisa manages